Hello and welcome to today's Google News Initiative training. Today we're looking at freelance tools. My name is Miguel de Souza. I work as part of the Google News Initiative, which is Google's effort to build a stronger future for journalism. Before we begin, I'd like to start today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of these lands on which we meet and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and community. I pay my respects to them and their cultures and to elders past, present and emerging. I'm a journalist, teacher and trainer. My name is Miguel de Souza. I've worked on the internet putting out news since 1994 for companies like AAP, news.com.au, 7 News and SBS. Thanks for joining us today. Feel free to ask questions during the live broadcast by typing them in the chat box. I'll try and respond to you. So today, our training is part of the Google News Initiative, and Google aims to support quality journalism, help evolve new business models for the industry, and deliver technological solutions for the media. Google develops tools to support journalists at all levels of the industry, and that's why today we're looking at tool sets to help sustain freelance journalists. Now, in 2018, the federal government's Future of Work report found that the number of people who held multiple jobs had held relatively steady at 8% for the previous 10 years. But if you expand your definition to include people as independent contractors, journalists with multiple sources of income, temporary workers and freelancing business owners, there could be as many as 1.3 million people working in Australia's gig or freelance economy. And while journalists are probably a fraction of that amount, and they're probably more familiar working this way, many more have joined the job market as newspaper and news site shutdowns have driven more journalists and storytellers into freelance work. So we're going to take a look at tools to keep your skills up, get your stories out, and keep you up to the minute with your news gathering. So let's begin. I want to start with a very new tool, or at least a showcase for a whole bunch of Google's tools. It's worth taking a tour through some of the key tools a freelancing journalist might find useful from Google's Journalist Studio. Now, what Journalist Studio is a collection of useful tools around to help protect and also just enhance the work of journalists. And first up, we're going to have a look at a tool called Pinpoint. Now, Pinpoint is a database analysis tool, and for a freelancer working with a Gmail account, this can essentially bring, thousands of hours of database knowledge into your desktop and really save you heaps and heaps of time when it comes to analysis. Firstly, you can apply Google's search and artificial intelligence to data analysis. So, for instance, if you are able to access massive troves of data, and we can look at different ways you can do that or accumulate it, you can speed up this analysis by being able to search through thousands of documents, essentially having your own Google search engine trained on it. It reads and supports a huge array of file types across formats like images, audio, and document formats. And we're talking things like PDFs, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, CSVs, images, which it will use optical character recognition to read. So for instance, again, if you're a freelancer looking to do analysis of a large amount of images, this can perhaps give you, speed up your sort of work quite substantially. And of course, it will also transcribe your audio. If you upload an audio file to it, it will extract text from it, give you clickable audio to preview, but it will also do things which is a feature, it'll extract names, places, and company or organization names from files, which is really useful for cross-referencing content. And it'll also work with Google search operators, as I mentioned before. It all works from your Gmail account and allows secure sharing with other individuals. There are other useful tools that are also part of Journalist Studio, and I might press on and show you a few of the others. Now, Outline could be an invaluable security tool for a freelancer investigating sensitive targets, particularly those who may have a fairly well-formed security apparatus of its own. Now, what does Outline allow you to do? Outline uses a so-called look-like-nothing protocol. It's hard to identify, unlike standard VPN protocols that are easy to identify and block. Outline doesn't collect personal information unless you opt in to provide it. It also doesn't collect information about the websites that you visit or with whom you communicate. Now, you can get started at the URL that you can see on the screen. And essentially what it allows you to do is it allows you to set up and manage your own private VPN server. So essentially, you can operate in a different domain, perhaps indicating that you may not be coming from where you are. So in a sense, it allows you to work securely and discreetly as a freelancer. Now, of course, protection is really important, particularly in these days when governments are using fairly sort of military-grade cyber attack technology against media outlets. We've seen that recently with the attacks, which were a ransomware exercise directed at Nine in Australia. Well, Project Shield is Google's attempt to essentially offer aimed at preventing the censoring of news and journalists through the use of what are known as distributed denial of service attacks, which are known as DDoS attacks. Now, DDoS attacks have been used to target human rights organizations as well as news sites. Freelance journalists with archives, contacts, data, and more stored on a web destination could also be targeted, which is why you might want to consider this sort of protection. Project Shield welcomes applications from news, human rights organizations, or elections monitoring organizations, and even individual journalists. So definitely do get started. Have a look at Project Shield and put in an application. Now, look, keeping your skills up is incredibly important for everyone, and for freelancers especially. Workplaces can help keep pace with workplace training, but the reality is you don't have to be off the pace with the latest in digital tools. In order to help journalists stay up to date with the latest tools and workflows for finding and telling news stories, Google's developed a training website. I've put the URL up on screen for you. It allows you at your own pace to learn about the elements of digital journalism, from finding and verifying stories to the web, to all sorts of other sorts of skills. Now, look, just a quick look at some of what it does. There are literally dozens of topics and skills to learn on g.co/news training. An increasing number of journalists are working on a freelance basis, launching their own podcasts or becoming their own publishers, often through the rise of newsletters. Now, Google News Initiative can help you with content generation, assist with platforms and formats, and even assist with financing. So let's have a look a little bit at a few little strategies freelancers can employ when it comes to content generation. Now, never underestimate the value of Google Alerts as a key news alert tool. In terms of story generation, without the benefit of paid news wires, Google Alerts coupled with search operators can act as a news monitoring tool for key documents on a website. Draw on your own background, use key terms from your research, track people, companies, politicians, or anything else. And here's a little tool that might help you with that process. These are a starting set of modifiers which will work in Google Alerts. Now, cite is you may already be aware of the using a plus or minus to remove or add results. You can also use a set of inverted commas, to ensure that you are matching for an exact phrase, but also Cite can narrow your search down to one URL or domain. It's a very useful operator. Intitle, intext, or inurl is also useful for narrowing your search down to words in the title, text on the page, or perhaps words in a semantic URL. Now, you can also use filetype to search for PDFs, docs, Excel spreadsheets, or just text and CSV docs. So keep that in mind. And of course, you can combine these in a string, much like you can see here in this Google Alerts box, to then absolutely fine-tune and narrow your searches. Now, daily and trending search data can also be a great source of material for stories to pitch or cover in any upcoming piece. Just going to put up the trends URL on screen. We're looking at a screen grab of real-time search data in the business category for news at roughly around 2 p.m. yesterday on the 1st of April. Now, let's break down trends and how you could use it. Remember that when you're searching in trends, sometimes the suggestion will say topic, but other times it'll describe the concept for that topic. For instance, virus for coronavirus. Basically anything that does not say search term is considered a topic. Use the suggested topic. It'll get you more robust results. You can also filter by location, and in Australia that means even right down to cities. And always remember that people tend to search for topics quite close to the event. So for instance, here are rising queries relating to the Easter holidays that we're currently in. Maybe a few parents or students worrying if there's a penalty for starting the holidays early, or how to get to the venue for the Easter show. Now play with the timeframes. 7 days out, the accumulated searches are a bit random, but the rising searches could indicate a fresh subject area for a story. Contrast this with the results you get for top searches for Easter. Much more predictable. Seasonal searches, you could argue. So, more than ever, a flexible worker more than ever for a flexible worker, now's the time to learn a new skill and put it into practice. Now, podcasts are a great example. Could this be a good accompaniment to your story? Maybe a great way to showcase material you've gathered along the way. Platforms like Apple and Spotify are paying for podcast series, and a sponsorship is also a commercial model supporting this format. Now, the world has changed. News used to be print or broadcast. It's now print, broadcast, online, interactive, on-demand, newsletter, Twitter, or live stream. And we're going to have a look at a couple of key tools, namely podcasts and newsletters. So let's get started. Here is, I'll share this link in comments, but let's just pop that into the chat. I've shared a link in the chat for the Should I Make a Podcast series. It's really worth getting started with, especially if you are interested in getting into the area. The 10 episodes cover everything from whether you should make a podcast through to the tools and tips from the pros on recording, editing, and pacing. I'll tell you about a few other tools that are available. Now, I'm going to assume that you have a computer, a mic, a camera, lights. You are a freelancer, of course. Once you have a script, sites like Words to Time can be extremely useful at helping you with pacing and working out how long you have between different sections. Online tools can also essentially allow you to construct complex soundscapes for your audio stories. It's a good way of lifting them out of the ordinary. I'll share some websites with audio libraries with you, but certainly the BBC's, which I've got linked over here, is a particularly useful one. Now, closer to home, this is the ABC's archive, which, as you would expect, is a really amazing archive of sounds, news archives, and just so much more. Naturally, you might have to license some work, but it's got a really easy to understand guide, to usage rights. So definitely keep an eye on that one. The advantage with the ABC is they cover lots and lots of different categories, and obviously as a national broadcaster, they are certainly covering a lot of significant news and historical events that you may be interested in using as material for your broadcast. And look, any mention of archives should definitely also include a mention of the National Library of Australia's audio resource of images, videos, and audio recordings. And again, it is quite extensive, and it contains a lot of material from significant sort of historical events, and really good for somebody putting together an audio broadcast or podcast. Now, once you get into broadcasting, or at least publishing a podcast, Google's Podcast Manager is a good tool to help you manage it. It'll give you analytics for your audio, right down to when listeners have stopped listening to your podcast. This tool gives you also an ability to let listeners find and play your podcast in a browser or in the Google Podcasting app. Your podcast is available on search, but also through Google Assistant and even Discover in some languages, which can be really useful. Now, let's move on to email newsletters. Substack email newsletters have made a steady return throughout the last year, reducing media noise for subscribers and allowing for a direct connection between the reader and the author. Substack have built a really solid brand for freelancers. You own your own content and you can post newsletters for free or for a fee. I'll talk about how much they take out of that charge later on. There is also Review, which is actually still on Substack, I'm sorry. Substack also gives you access to analytics and charts of what's popular with paying readers. Now, that can be really useful when it comes to content generation and also targeting audiences in an area perhaps where there's maybe a high demand and a low sort of supply of content. Now, I was talking about Review before. This is Review. Review was recently acquired by Twitter, which is the other big player in the newsletter sphere. One of the big differences between Substack and Review is price. Now, while neither cost any money to use, if you build paid subscriptions, they will take a percentage. Now, Substack takes 10%, while Review takes 5%. My suggestion would be give both of them a good look. You have to go past the initial subscription phase with both of them. But as I say, creating an account is free and you can always delete afterwards. But you at least can get an idea of the sort of features and what you can do with each one. Now, speaking of newsletters, they aren't necessarily always just about static or text-based content, because now Google has come up with what are known as the AMP, or Accelerated Mobile Pages protocol. Well, what is AMP and why is it in a session on freelance tools? Well, in a publishing age where engagement online is crucial, and up to 70% of news sites' audiences are on mobile, if a solo operator had access to technology that helped them create mobile-optimized content that loads instantly on all devices, well, that's AMP. Now, AMP allows you to embed carousels of images, widgets, and other dynamic features in an email. The user doesn't have to leave their inbox. They can stay on your email, and instantly you've created a much, much more engaging experience than just a conventional text. There's a full sandbox for you to experiment with on the AMP website, and I will give you one proviso. This is a code-based tool, so be prepared to learn some new code-based skills, which is quite important. And as I say, this is going to elevate your skill set in any case above the norm if you can pick up something like this. It is a very, very relatively easy to learn tool, but as I say, it's a little bit of a development on some of the other tools that I've shown, which are very much in the conventional what you see is what you get format. With AMP, you may have to learn some coding, but what you end up with is an email that is far more engaging because you're able to build multimedia elements into it. So we hope you found this useful. One more little reminder to definitely do go along to g.co/news training for all sorts of great tips and keep up to date with your skills. But for now, my name is Miguel de Souza. I really appreciate your time today, and hopefully you've found this session very useful. Now, as I say, if you do want to get in touch, just email me or find me on Twitter at those details. I'll leave them up. But for now, I'll say goodbye.